guys. Long time no see. The elements have been calling to me, and I've been feeling their pull from deep within my loins. Here we are! It's an Empires of Aether update, and this is just a small taste of what is to come, what is in the works. We've had a long time since any real competitive games have been played, and so it's difficult to say if the meta would stay the same once we return, and we do plan on doing that imminently. But the nations that were dominant beforehand, of course, Earth at the top. And Earth's been due for an update for a long time, so here's just a small taste of it. Earth is so consistent, and yet their strategy is pretty boring, and so you would really only find yourself playing Earth if you just really wanted to get a win. And there were so many situations where Earth was almost a free win. They have such a straight pathway to victory, and it's so hard to interfere, right? It requires a little bit of RNG from the opponent's side to really interfere with it. But also, they need just more flashy abilities to keep up with the excitement that is the game today. And so just a couple of new additions for Earth today. Room with a View, WMD, Can You Smell? And Catapult. As we want monuments to be more and more integrated into the game, that's just my own personal goal, as I love the aspect of monuments. It's the Catapult. The Catapult is their monument, and it's going to aid in any aggression or defense to hopefully allow them to contend in the middle of the board. The Catapult is going to add plus 20 to any battle attacking or defending within 2 tiles of it. And actually, I think I want to add the additional text right now on the fly that it shouldn't actually involve that tile itself, right? Catapults can't just attack right around them. They have to attack a certain distance away. But WMD is a tier 3 passive where their Catapult's effects have no range because the Catapult has a secondary effect in which you may discard an advantage card to eliminate an army within 2 tiles. So everything's within that 2 tile range, which allows your star tile to be really solid at contending with bosses, but also fighting for those other star tiles in the beginning stages of the game. But WMD is when we hit tier 3, we can go from any range and we can use that secondary effect multiple times per turn. So we can eliminate a bunch of armies if we've got a bunch of advantage cards. And what are we going to use for that? Well, a tier 1, Can You Smell? For every mountain tile you own, draw an advantage card, discard any announced cards until you receive the proper amount of advantage cards. Really solid there. And then Room with a View. This actually used to be a tier 3 title for a card, and now a tier 1 card. At the start of the game, declare one of the tiles adjacent to your capital tile as a star tile. So you're really only going to do this if you're at the 16-16 or 20-20 position because the star tile is still going to cost that 5-5 or 6-6 for it. But what it allows you to do is secure a really safe positioning for your Catapult. That means it's not as relevant in tier 2, but if you're taking WMD when you go to tier 3, it's a really solid play. And I know we're all looking at it in the middle of our screen. What card is that in the top row in the middle? Tectonic Plates. It is finally a tier 2 card. It should have been a tier 2 a long time ago. And honestly, it could be a tier 3 if you wait for the late game. It's an aggressive card. It's a defensive card. It can secure objectives for you. It does it all. It is just the bread and butter of Earth. But it's why Earth was able to ever contend in the early game when that is not their intention. And a very shocking surprise here for those of you that follow the elements. This is not just a small little patch to Earth. There's been an issue in the game, and that is, of course, whenever you get a corner, your last pick in your corner is only food. Building materials, I know, is not an equal presence on the board, and that is intentional. But what do you do when you're in the 10-10 or 13-13 spot, and your corners are just chock full of food? Introducing the umami element. The 4th element that will fall in line with the sand, poison, and nature line of elements. The umami thrives on food. Of course, the gourmands of the Etherean realm, they do not have building materials. So if you buy a mountain, a desert, or swamp, it literally is not producing resources for you. Your entire economy is food. You purchase tiles for the total cost of the resources. So lakes are 5 food, 2 BM primarily. That means lakes would cost 7 food for you. Mountains cost 2 food, 5 BM. That means mountains would cost 7 food for you. And yet it produces nothing for you. But the caveat to that is all of your tiles that produce food produce double the amount of food. And your starting resources, if you're 10-10, you're actually starting 20-0. if you're starting 2020, you're actually starting 40-0. Another really, really cool passive of the Umami Nation is they are unaffected by those feeding effects such as tapeworms or locusts from sand. And so it's a really, really good counter to those economic sabotaging comps and builds that people are starting to run. But downside here, their soldiers do cost one more food. But there's a way to overcome that. The Umami, I think, is going to be a really interesting fit, and I think it's going to be very situational. With no building materials, they cannot build structures until they achieve certain missions, if you will, at some point in the game. But their tier 1s are all about acquiring those structures that they need to contend in the early game. Seasoning the skillet, place a barracks, 2 defensive fortifications on an own tile. This is going to be your first barracks here. So wherever your general is going to go, you're going to slap this down, and you're going to get your soldiers and spread them out. Chef's Kiss, convert an own tile into a field tile and place a resource building on it. Currently, this is the only way in Tier 1, aside from advantage cards, for the Umami Nation to get a resource building on it. But that field, once you get a resource building on it, is going to produce 8 food for them a turn. That is pretty gnarly. Back of the pantry. This is interesting text on here. Reactivate an announce card that has been used this game, or choose to season your stew with it. Well, my goodness, what could that mean? Cloudy with a chance of meatballs. I am praying for the day that we actually get someone to pop this card, which allows you to look at the next 3 weather events. And, of course, it says with a chance of meatballs. Well, here are the meatballs. Imagine you play this, and you make it to where the next card, the next weather event that is played, of course, is the meatballs. The Umami Nation would absolutely thrive. I can see it now. So now, what are they actually playing for? There's a lot of strategies that impede on this in the early game, which means they do not want to stay in Tier 1. They want to go to Tier 2 as quickly as they can. And the reason why is because their entire game plan, as of right now, their first strategy, revolves around their monument. And their monument is right here, stirring the pot, where you turn your star tile into a stew. But there's various seasonings you can add to it, and every seasoning gives you a different power. But the downside to that is, if you ever lose this star tile, the opponent that captures it gets all of the seasonings within it, all of the items within it, and we'll talk about those here in just a moment. But what I think their most powerful ability is Food Coma. A passive that when an opponent attacks you, you may give them 10 food to stop the battle. They must accept this deal. There's no debates. They're getting paid for attacking you, yes, but they don't get to actually execute the attack. But you can only use this on one attack per opponent each turn. And so the same people that just got paid off, right? They're in a food coma. They're knocked out. The tryptophan from the Thanksgiving turkey has knocked them out. They're napping on the couch. They can't attack, so they'll have to attack you from a separate tile from separate units. So this means that we can have people putting pressure on the stew tile, and it's not that big of a deal. Hopefully I'm making a bunch of food, but the food coma is going to be able to stave off any outside threat. Meanwhile, it's also making a bunch of food for you. This tile produces 5 food per turn, and of course, because our nation passive is to double that, it's going to produce 10 food per turn. Very nice there. And then we're progressing, and also it gets 4 defensive fortifications on it as well. So I'm thinking in the earlier stage of the game, you're not going to have as many soldiers. I could be wrong on this, and this could be the most broken aspect of them, is that because they're making so much food, and even though they're only going to have a couple of barracks out there, they might have a ton of soldiers out there. And if that's the case, then we have to look at that. But either way, they're going to have 4 defensive fortifications on it to contend with some smaller scale attacks. But let's get to Bone Apple Teeth. Their Tier 3 Titan passive. Your general's combat value is whatever your current food is. When you get to the later stage of the game, you're going to be making a ton of food, ideally. And so if your food's at 5, your general's attacking with a 5. That's not good. But if your food's at 80, then your general's attacking with an 80. And I think that's very likely because what I foresee the Umami's win conditions being are the economic win condition, which instead of being 50-50 for them, it would be 100 food, 0 BM for them to achieve that win condition, along with their stew. The Secret Family Recipe Tier 3, add 5 different seasonings to your stew tile to acquire 1 win condition. And we'll talk about these first seasonings over here in just a moment, but the last Tier 3 that we have here is Invitation to the Cookout. We can take a threat anywhere on the board aside from their capital and bring it into the stew. And that seems counterintuitive, but remember, they might be in the stew and they can't attack that turn, but they could attack the following turn. But it's not that big of a deal when we've got Food Coma in our back pocket. We can bring them to our stew and keep them trapped there permanently if we wanted to. That's pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy. So now let's talk about the seasonings. This gluten-free tier 2 is not the traditional seasoning. So my idea for this is that you're going to have different recipes depending on the situation. And so you may sacrifice an army at your stew tile to add a new type of seasoning with the following effect. Your soldiers now cost 3 food each. Remember, originally they're costing 4 food apiece. This is going to make them the original cost of 3 food. But let's go into the seasonings that you can have access to every single game. They do not count as abilities. But here's what you're doing. Put some pepper in your step, placing 2 combat advantage cards into your stew to receive this effect. Your soldiers have +2 added to their dice roll when in combat. So now hopefully we're seeing sort of the mechanism behind this. You are literally going to add things to the pot so that if an opponent takes it, they are going to receive great reward. Not only are they getting a star tile, but they're getting a lot of things in return depending on how much you've added there. Tactical Spice, add 3 non-combat advantage cards into your stew to receive this effect. You draw 2 advantage cards per turn for the rest of the game and can hold 6 advantage cards. So it's almost the Aether passive. You can hold more cards and you're drawing more. And the reason why is because it's sort of a scaling ability. And then I really like the effects of some of these other ones. It's a little gamey. Place a boss monster that you control into your stew to receive this effect. Advance to the next tier. So this could be the Viprous Hydra armies. This could be Kamoya the Basilisk. This could be Mink the Thief. You control one of those monsters and you drop it in and you automatically progress to tier 3. That's pretty cool. I think it's unlikely, but we'll talk about the hilarity of this here in just a moment. Added fiber by dismantling structures. We can now build more structures. We can place resource buildings on own tiles for 5 food. Additionally, your general may place a barracks on any tile he claims for free. This is going to be great risk here. You do not have many structures in the earlier stages of the game. Maybe you're even destroying one of your 2 barracks that you get in tier 1 in the early stages of tier 2. In which case, you got to be positioned in order to be able to contend against any invaders on the outside. And the last few seasonings we've got here. Oops, let's bring this a little center down here. Oh, boom. You have to set it to Gumbo. A little SpongeBob reference there if you're not familiar. Place 5 more non-combat advantage cards into your stew to receive the following effect. Your stew tile now produces 10 food each turn. So you're using that Tactical Spice seasoning to draw more cards per turn and hold more, which scales into you have to set it to Gumbo, where you're getting a massive economic output. Michelin Star Chef is when you own 2 star tiles, one of them, of course, being your monument. The other one is just something that you've acquired over time. You forfeit it, and now your chef, your general, can move 2 tiles per turn. But my favorite of all, Ratatouille is my absolute favorite Disney movie of all time. Anyone can cook, says Chef Gusteau, or be cooked. Place Mink the Thief, which is the most rat-like creature we have in the game as it stands right now. If you put Mink specifically into your stew, you receive 1 win condition automatically. Is it going to happen often? Absolutely not. But also when it does happen, it does also combine with this seasoning as well. Oops, wrong way. It's a little gamey seasoning. That's 2 seasonings for... That's a lot of bang for your buck. And also, seeing as your other primary win condition is the secret family recipe to get 5 different seasonings to your stew, well, we got some good things happening here. So that is a little debut to the Umami Nation. And of course, we will do our elemental perspective video when we get a little more development in here. But we're looking forward to it. Looking forward to the changes to the game. This update is going to come with some more advantage cards and outs cards as well to keep things a little more exciting, keep it new, keep it fresh. And we hope to see you at the next table. Bye-bye.